the Dean of Chicago Booth, Edward Snyder. I'm going to be back out there.
Thank you, alumni, faculty, students, friends of Chicago Booth, for being here on my favorite day of the year. I'd like to welcome especially students from all our MBA programs. Would you all take a moment, students, and stand up? All right, thank you for being here. And congratulations to those of you who will be graduating on Saturday, June 12th, not very far away. After lunch, we will begin with our keynote panel on the future of finance, featuring John Cochrane, Rajan, Steve Kaplan, Cliff Asness, and Toby Moskowitz. The discussion will be moderated by Adam Davidson. Many of you know him from NPR's Planet Money. Some of you may have even had a class with Adam. He's a 92 graduate of the College of the Best University in the Galaxy. As someone who spent more than 15 years at the University of Chicago, first as an economics student, as a visiting professor, and then years later as dean of the school now known as Chicago Booth, I know well that we gain so much when we delve deeply into issues that are of great importance. No other school can do it this way. At Chicago Booth, the values of the University of Chicago meet the global and sometimes personal challenges of leadership and management and public policy. Those challenges do not come with an easy set of answers. And in the case of today's dialogue, I'm quite interested to learn to what extent our panelists will reach a consensus on what the future of finance holds and also on what policies should be adopted. And as our alumni know and friends know, leading by asking questions, using analytical frameworks, paying attention to the facts, helps leaders arrive at the optimal solutions. That approach, the Chicago approach, has guided our graduates through many changes we've seen in finance, in marketing, in entrepreneurship, through economic cycles, and periods of major technological adjustments in every sector, in every country around the world for more than 100 years. That ability to push for the next best idea, not caring who came up with the idea, but how they came up with the idea, is using Chicago values every day. Let me turn to more current issues. Over the past 2 years, this community has done an incredible job of reaching out and building up our relationship capital. I see a yet sharper contrast between Booth and some of our competitors. While we have expanded our relationships during this tough time and made additional investments in our people and resources to support our students and alumni, we've maintained and, I believe, increased our momentum. Others didn't rise to meet the challenge and have lost theirs. That achievement says so much about the whole Chicago Booth community, and I want to thank everyone here who has sent in a job opportunity, recommended a classmate, referred a potential student, and used their network to build their businesses. That engagement between students, alumni, and the school has truly set Chicago Booth apart. Lastly, as you know, my time as dean at Chicago Booth is coming to an end soon, although I hasten to add that I'm working hard through this final lap. Many people have been extremely generous in expressing their thanks to me in contributing to the rise of Chicago Booth. My simple response to this is, I want to thank you. It's been my privilege to be in this role and contributing in the way that I can. As to the rise of Chicago Booth, my short analysis is that the conditions favoring our school, and I saw Dean Bob Hamada here, and I'm sure he would agree with me. The conditions favoring our school were in place well before I came, and they will continue well into the future. Chicago's core value, that the best idea wins, that it's not a hierarchy of people, but a hierarchy of ideas, that's a competitive advantage for our school. What could be a better core value in the modern economy, where human capital is the most important type of capital and global opportunities abound? The conditions favoring our school were and are our great alumni who are exceeding throughout the world in all sectors, and of course, the world's best faculty. We are very much at home with our university. We will continue to aspire. Indeed, Chicago Booth remains committed to our objective to be the best business school in the world and recognized as such. Thank you. We will resume in about 35 minutes. Ladies and gentlemen, I feel like saying let's get ready to rumble, but rather I'll just say I'm honored to welcome you to the 58th Annual Management Conference, Keynote panel. We have a lot of people waiting for this special discussion. This is the all-star panel on the future of finance. I'm pleased, as I mentioned earlier, to have Adam Davidson, the NPR International Business and Economics Correspondent and Director of NPR's Planet Money, a multimedia project covering the global economy. Adam, again, welcome back to the University of Chicago.
Thank you, Ted.
In alphabetical order, our panelists today are Cliff Asness. He is managing and founding principal of AQR Capital Management. John Cochrane, the AQR Capital Management Professor of Finance. I've been told that John sometimes has a little sign below his name card that says, "No, I cannot get you a job at AQR." Next is Steve Kaplan, the Neubauer Professor of Entrepreneurship and Finance. Toby Moskowitz, the Fama Family Professor of Finance. And Rajan, the Gleacher Distinguished Service Professor of Finance. Adam, take it away.
Great. Well, we forgot to tell you, Ted, we've decided to do away with all the fancy intellectual stuff. We're just going to do 10 hot stocks that can't go down in any market. So, I'm just kidding. I'm so excited to be in this venue because covering this financial crisis for the, I hate to say it, mainstream media can be a real pain because, at least judging by our email inbox, an awful lot of people do not want subtle, nuanced analysis. They want villains. And, you know, we're certainly getting that impression now. And I don't like doing that. I don't see real villains here. I don't see people that you can hold out and say, that jerk caused this whole crisis. And anyway, even if I did, that's not my competitive advantage. That's what Congress is so good at. So I'm going to leave it to them. So there's a particular thing that I feel like my profession, many people in my profession of journalism have fallen into, though. And the cast of characters changes. Obviously, this week, the villain is Goldman Sachs. It's been Wall Street, whatever that is, that undifferentiated mass. And in a surprising number of places, it always surprises me, some people in journalism, I'm thinking of the New Yorker, say it really is all the fault of the University of Chicago. And I've decided to step out of my role as objective journalist and just say, I'm making a call here. It was not the fault of the University of Chicago. It was not the fault of Milton Friedman. It was not the fault of the economics department or Chicago Booth. In fact, I think everyone in this room knows whose fault this crisis really is. I think we all agree, Northwestern's. and I'm just kidding, I'm kidding. We all know Northwestern doesn't do anything serious enough to cause an international crisis. the reason we're here is not simply because University of Chicago did not cause the crisis, but because these guys and a lot more at Chicago Booth and the University of Chicago have some, dare I say it, real deep insights that can help us understand what happened, help us understand where we're going, help us understand what the next few years and decades will look like. Or when we talked, I learned it's really two things about the future: what maybe should happen and what maybe will happen. And there's a lot of distance between those maybe. So I'm going to just lay down some quick ground rules. For the last hour or so, people have been coming up to me and very skeptically saying, "You're going to moderate this group?" And looking very pityingly at me. And because this is a very rambunctious group. I got a little hint last night at John Cochrane's house for dinner. He has a true University of Chicago family, 4 awesome, really smart kids, 2 in the lab school, 2 in the college, who also are Eugene Fama's grandkids, and they would just get into these incredibly passionate arguments about, I think there was something about, I couldn't follow it, about French directors and the auteur theory. I couldn't understand a thing. And John, using his libertarian sensibilities, did not impose order from above. He allowed order to emerge out of chaos. And I'm going to take that as my guide today, although I'll try and keep us maybe at a little bit on path. And so what we're going to do is we'll learn from these guys for 50 minutes or so, then we'll open it up for your questions. And speaking of John, he sent us all an email about this panel. And you do know you're getting an email from a U of C professor when you print it out. It's 6 pages long, and he apologizes because it's so brief. And so I'm not going to read all 6 pages, but I thought he described what this panel should be very well, so I'm going to read that. I'd like to avoid one more panel on what caused the crash, or squashing soundbite fallacies, such as, does the crash tell us markets are inefficient? I'd like to avoid, what do you think of paragraph 254, section D of the Dodd bill, or other very specific regulatory proposals? And I'd like to avoid forecasts. When do you think housing will recover? We've all been there, done that, and got the t-shirt. If efficient markets teach us anything, it's that a panel of academics at lunch have no better ability to forecast than anyone else, and we're not even trying. We don't spend our days poring over the numbers and trying to make unconditional forecasts. Our opinions on the characters and personalities of public officials carry no more weight than anyone else's. But we are good at cause and effect. How will X change things? What are the downsides of such and such policy, and so forth? To every good idea, there is an unintended effect, and we're good at spotting them. We're good at spotting the economic fundamentals, underlying events and policies, good and bad. So I think that's a really good guide. We'll touch on the news of the day, but we're not going to, this is not, everything about, sorry, Mark Brickell, about derivative policy and whether this legislation is exactly the right or exactly the wrong way. But we'll get into a little bit of the news of the day. But first, let's start big picture and deal with some real questions. Then towards the end, we'll get to the stuff maybe you all want, which is, how are people going to make money over the next few decades? We'll see if we can have any answers to that. So one thing I'm always fascinated talking to academic economists, past crises, like the Great Depression or stagflation, lent many economists to say, wow, our models were wrong. Our models didn't allow this to happen. And so they had to change their models. And so I wanted to just quickly go through the panel and see, was there anything in this crisis that has made you rethink your models fundamentally, or made you more confident in your models? John?
Oh, I get to start on that one?
Yeah.
Okay, and we stop in an hour, right?
Yeah.
Well, I would say yes. What have I personally learned? Not what you might think. I mean, a lot of people say, oh, stocks went down, that proves markets are inefficient after all. No, sorry. We promised you efficient markets, not clairvoyant markets. That's kind of silly. But what we did learn is that liquidity, institutional structure, those kinds of things matter, and mattered in this crisis much more than I, at least, had been paying attention to. Now, I think Raghu had been paying attention a lot sooner than I had, and I think wisely so. We basically had a run in the shadow banking system. So what I didn't really appreciate was that this shadow banking system could have a run, and that there was lots of little sand in the gears and rules of the game that mattered and that caused that crash.